and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Thank God it's Friday. And, you know, it seems...
It's open
there
line
we go.
Friday.
That's right, my friends. It's Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. This is the day where we talk about whatever you want to talk about. You see, most of the time, you kind of have to be on the same page with me. It is my show, after all. But not on Friday.
2 + 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5.
You think it's your
and this
show.
It is
not
my
to be
show.
discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
Words do mean things, my
So,
friends.
I played that for a reason.
Yes.
You use the word illustrious. Now,
Yes.
I'm an old preacher, and a lot of times people stand up and pray, and they use redundant phrases, and you'll hear every time they pray, they use the same phrase.
Uh-huh.
And it causes me to start thinking about the words. You use that word illustrious.
Illustrious.
And I like that, and here's why. And it's actually a compliment to you. Behind the word illustrious is the concept of illustrating. You illustrate every day what conservative values are and how they work and how they relate, and very few people do that.
Very few.
And if you're a young person and you begin to watch this, what you see here is different than what you see in other places. So thank you for illustrating this old dinosaur's way of thinking.
Well, see, flattery will get you everywhere with me, Agent 29.
I know, that's why I did it.
Yeah, well, you do bring up a good point, that what we do on this show is talk conservatism from beginning to end. And, you know, and it's not my original idea. I would love to take credit for it, but it's not. Growing up, I have always been a big fan, or was a big fan of Rush Limbaugh. And I remember the very first time I listened to him, I had one of those big console radios, you know, the kind that take up half a wall. And the only thing in it's a radio and a couple of speakers and maybe I think mine had a record player in it.
They were good speakers, though.
Oh man, you could blow the windows
Yeah.
out with it. But anyway, I was down playing in my room. I think maybe I was 10, 11, something like that, really young. And I was just, you know, trying to find a radio station, and my room was in the basement, and so you couldn't pick up a lot of different stations. And so when I found one, I was like, ooh, radio station. And so I just started listening. And Rush Limbaugh always made perfect sense to me. And I listened to him all the way up to, you know, when you're in high school, you can't really catch his, program. But I would go listen to the replay. Different KOA, or not KOA, but K2 radio in Casper. They would replay the Rush Limbaugh program later on in the day so that you could listen to it. And so I have always admired his ability to explain what is going on in the world and apply conservative principles to it. This is what this story means, and this is why you should look at it in this way. And so that's what I try to do on this show, is to take what's in the news and say, all right, what does this mean? How should we look at it? Why looking at it from the left is wrong-headed.
So I'm a little older than you.
Just a tad.
And by the time Rush Limbaugh came on the air and was nationally broadcast so we could actually hear him, I was married with children in the military, in the Army. And I had been raised in a very politically active family. My father was a political nut. He was a John Birch Society person and ingrained into me certain ideas and concepts from the beginning. And I remember coming home from grade school in Laramie out of second and third grade and spouting little things that I had heard that were political.
Right.
And him just going off. And Barry Goldwater was a big deal. So, I grew up like that. And then finally, there came a time when I'm listening to the radio, somebody said, you got to listen to this guy, Rush. And I turned him on and I thought, thank God, there's finally somebody out there that is saying the things that I've thought all my life.
Yes.
And I'm glad you're around.
Well, thank you. And thank you for listening to the program. I wouldn't do what I do if you weren't listening. And I have to tell you, I never would have thought how I never could have imagined the big place that this audience takes up in my heart. I mean, it is truly an honor to be able to sit here and talk to you. And I'll tell you what, I get the biggest kick out of being somewhere out in the public, and I hear somebody call one of these redcoats a redcoat, or when I hear, hey, this person over here, they really don't like being called a redcoat.
It is weird when you go someplace and somebody will be walking by while you're in conversation, and they'll stop and look at you and say, "You're Agent 29."
Yeah,
it's weird.
It's so much fun.
Well, I was speaking earlier, and I mentioned Barry Goldwater. If you look up above me there, there's original poster from his campaign in '64.
Yeah, that's one of the I don't know if we'd call it the prize jewels, but it's one of the things we really like in the studio.
It cost a certain friend of ours a pretty penny.
It did.
The bidding war.
It did. All right. So let's get on with the program. Here's what's going to happen today. We're going to talk a little bit. I've got a couple of stories I want to hit in the beginning. And then at the bottom of the hour, we have an interview with U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to join us live. And weird, she has stuff to do on the floor of the House. But we recorded it yesterday, and it's a great discussion. We talked about the Jack Smith hearing that happened yesterday. Of course, we recorded the interview before the hearing, so over the weekend I'll get some videos of what happened after, and maybe we can compare and contrast. Also, yesterday I pulled out my soapbox and went after the FCC. Well, we talked about that, too. And then there's a couple of other items in the interview, but we'll play that at the bottom of the hour. It's really interesting. I'm sure you'll find it pretty entertaining. But we begin this morning with something that I don't really know that much about. Well, the subject matter. I mean, I know about policy all around it, but the PRCA the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame, and perhaps you've heard about this, but they approached the city of Cheyenne and said, hey, we want to have our Hall of Fame in Cheyenne. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, Cheyenne is the city that has Cheyenne Frontier Days, the big daddy of them all. And so it was a private deal. And the PRCA said, we want to be in Cheyenne. How can we make this happen?
It was also kept a little bit hush-hush. I keep doing that to myself. It was also a little bit hush-hush because the folks in the PRCA didn't want to alert the folks in Colorado Springs that they were looking elsewhere and kind of wanted to know the feasibility and whatnot. So, yeah, it's dealing with a public entity, but in a private way, and this whole issue gets kind of murky.
Yeah, it does, but there's a lot of things going on with it. And well, now Cody has jumped into the mix. And so let's just start with the cow pie. An article entitled Cody Joins Bidding War for Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. And I quote, Cody city leaders have invited the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association to visit the rodeo capital of the world as the PRCA considers relocating its... Oh, so it's not the Hall of Fame, it's their headquarters. Let's just get that straight. I thought it was a Hall of Fame. Considers relocating its headquarters. The PRCA said it's taking the offer seriously, along with others, including one from Texas. A bidding war for the PRCA appears to have begun in Wyoming. Cody has thrown its hat into the ring with an invitation for rodeo officials to visit the self-proclaimed rodeo capital of the world. Mike Darby, a board member with Park County Travel Council, and there's something we got to talk about right there. The Travel Council confirmed to the Cowboy State Daily that Cody has extended an invitation to the PRCA to visit the city and see what the Yellowstone National Park neighbor has to offer. Now, we've started a little bit behind everyone else, Darby told the Cowboy State Daily, but we've got the great site picked out, and we're offering them to come visit, see what we've got, and see how it works. I mean, the worst thing they can do is say no, right? Okay, well, that's kind of my philosophy. You know, when I'm shooting for the moon, well, let's see if I can get an interview with the vice president or the president. You know, I mean, the worst he can say is no. But there's a lot of issues surrounding this. So first, this was a private deal. The PRCA wanted to go to Cheyenne, and it does make a lot of sense. I mean, that's where Cheyenne Frontier Days is. It is the big daddy of them all. That's the rodeo in the rodeo world. And so, I mean, it makes perfect sense to be there in Cheyenne. Now, Cody got wind of this, or some of the city officials in Cody got wind of this, and they said, you know, we'd like them to be here. Now, Cody has the Cody Stampede, and the lovely Christine and I do enjoy going to the Cody Night Rodeo anytime we're in town, during the summer, that is. So we enjoy that. But let's be perfectly honest about this. The Cody Stampede is not the Cheyenne Frontier Days. I mean, you're kind of comparing apples and oranges. But there again, you know, rodeo is big all over Wyoming. And if you want to make an argument for Cody, which I think it's a fair enough argument, why don't we pick Sheridan? Sheridan has the Sheridan Wyo Rodeo. That's a big one. I mean, it's nowhere near Cheyenne Frontier Days, but there again, neither is the Cody Stampede. Now, the reason I say that this is how things ought to work is that it's all private, right? It's, hey, we found out you guys are looking for a place to put your headquarters, and we think it would be great here. Let us shoot you an offer. I think that's how things ought to work.
I just looked up to clarify, and the headquarters and the Hall of Fame are all in the same building. Okay,
all right. So I wasn't wrong. See, documented to be almost always right. Okay, so thank you for that clarification, Agent 29. But see, government shouldn't have, the reason, and remember that word, shouldn't have any place in this matter. It's a private business transaction. You have one private company that wants to put its headquarters somewhere else or somewhere, and they're trying to figure out a way. And if you catch wind of it, you say, hey, maybe you haven't thought of Cody, but this might be a good place. That's where the conversation ought to stay.
Yeah, and if a group of individuals in Cheyenne want to gather and collect money to help make that happen, terrific.
Yes. Now, where we go off course, where we get off course, is when government starts getting in the way of this whole thing. Well, we'll work up some sort of tax break where you don't have to pay property taxes. That should make it more inviting for you. Or, we'll give you a whole bunch of incentives. Perhaps you don't have to pay this tax or that tax. That's where all of these deals get screwed up, because you start picking winners and losers. And then the question becomes, hey, I have this business. I want to move somewhere. Why can't I have a tax break? Well, it is picking winners and losers. But there is another wrinkle to this whole thing. And I haven't read through this entire article yet. But Ken, why don't you give us the the other wrinkle that's in this whole deal?
Well, we have what I believe, frankly, is an immoral tax, and we can get into that, and we call it the lodging tax. And essentially what it does is operate under the idea that we can fleece people traveling through Wyoming, take their money while they're here, and doesn't really hurt our own people. It benefits our own people.
Right.
And as much as I disagree with that tax, it exists. And it does accumulate a tremendous pile of money.
A
And so
lot.
the
Way
idea-
more. Way. And just hold on just a second. I don't mean to interrupt you. But when this lodging tax was instituted, we thought it was going to generate about $12 million. Well, it didn't generate $12 million. It generated $40 million, and that was a couple of years ago, and we've been adding to it. So it created a huge pile of money.
Yeah, whenever there's a huge pile of money, there's bound to be politicians.
Yeah, they want to spend it, man.
And the idea is to basically give $15 million to help move this entity into Cheyenne. And a lot of things had been done, they say, of necessity, kind of behind the curtain to get this done so that we didn't cause more problems. And now it's kind of come out, which it should come out in the public. And Cody says, hey, what about us? And Colorado Springs says, hey, what about us? And a couple places in Texas say, hey, what about us? And now we've got this crazy bidding war going on.
Yeah. Now the lodging tax, and if you don't dig into it, I guess it could somehow make sense. I mean, I don't believe in higher taxes. We should have the lowest amount of taxes possible, and we certainly shouldn't be fleecing people that want to come here. One of the factors that people use in figuring out where they want to go on vacation is the cost. How much is it going to cost us to go to, Cody or to, the Grand Canyon or to New York or whatever? But you always sit down and say, all right, how much money do we have to spend? And when you artificially increase prices, it has the effect of chasing people out. Now, it's deceptive. And I'm going to tell you why it's deceptive here in just a second. Because the lodging tax is raising a whole bunch of money. Well, so obviously the price of vacations doesn't impact the decision of people coming here. Well, one of the reasons why that lodging tax is generating so much money is the people who live in Wyoming. Many, many, many people travel for all sorts of activities. And if you've ever traveled in Wyoming in the winter, sometimes you get to a place and you just have to stay there. And so when there's a basketball tournament in Casper, or there's there's a band thing over in Cody, or there's a speech meet in Rock Springs. I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, but Wyoming's kind of a big place. And sometimes when you travel to these meets, you have to buy a motel room.
Yeah, the speech meet doesn't really matter. Nobody goes to those.
Yeah, no, nobody does. Nobody cares about speech and debate. No, doesn't ever figure into it. That's not true at all. But anyway, the people that live here pay a significant portion of that lodging tax. And so it's not just a tourism tax. It is not just fleecing people that want to come here. It's fleecing Wyoming citizens again. Now, you add on top of it that when there's a pile of money sitting around, politicians like to spend it. And they find ever increasingly creative and inventive ways to spend it. And who likes to spend your money the most? Well, it's the redcoats and the Democrats. They think of all sorts of programs that they can give money to. Let me just give you one, maybe $300,000 to Wyoming Equality for condoms. I'm not even joking. That actually happened. And so there's this pile of money, and there is a line of thinking in the legislature that it is somewhat seductive in that, hey, we've got this giant pile of money sitting over here, and we may as well use it for a good purpose. Because if we don't, the liberals are going to spend it on drag shows for children and drag queen story hours, and we'll probably build them a building to go along with it. And so in an effort to prevent those things that have a very negative cultural effect on our state, and on the country too, and on children mostly, let's spend that money over here. Well, that was the thinking that went into the shooting sports complex that is now slated to be in Cody. I guess that's a done deal. It's not slated. It's a done deal. And what happens though is anytime you get one of these projects, it's never the initial cost. It is never stops there. The initial cost will be paid, and then the next time the legislative session rolls around, it will be, hey, you know what? That $10 million that you spent on the shooting sports complex, that's not going to cover it. Really, we need $20 million. And then it won't stop at $20 million. It'll be, well, we need 4 more employees. And then it'll be, well, you know, we need a new coffee house. We need a clubhouse for the shooting sports complex. And it continues. And it never, ever stops. And so anytime government gets involved, the only thing it does is creates more government. All right, so back to the rodeo. So this is a private situation, or at least it ought to be. And now you have cities and towns that are trying to inject government into it by using matching funds. Hey, now we need $15 million to convince these people to come here. The answer to that should be no. Like, there should not be any public money going into this. Government doesn't have any place in it, nor does it have any place in the private market at all. But as it sits, though, now we've got a whole bunch of liberals trying to get involved in bringing this to town. So, Ken, you mentioned that Texas and Colorado are also in play. Let's see here. Woody stressed that the PRCA hasn't been the one pursuing change, and it won't proceed unless it makes sense to do so. Quote, if it does make sense, there will be something that is hard for employees and membership, he said, but sometimes leadership has to make difficult decisions for the long-term gain. The fact that Wyoming has already stepped up with an offer of $15 million for moving expenses is significant, Woody said. Now, he's with the PRCA, and not something any other states, including Texas, have yet offered. Texas has been involved in several different conversations, he said, but I don't know that anything has risen to a legislative decision yet, like Wyoming. Well, this, again, the vote on this one should be no. We should not be getting involved in a private transaction at all. Colorado Springs has also been talking to the PRCA. Quote, they've had their foot in the door, he said. The PRCA is a prized citizen of this city and county, and they don't want to see us go anywhere. So they've scrambled hard, and we'll see what they come up with to make the decision, whether it's Texas or Cody or Cheyenne or any other folks that have made offers to us. But you see, this is the argument that comes from people that support the Wyoming Business Council. This is Josh Durrell to a T. That these businesses, okay, actually, Ken, you know what? This is a perfect example of why the Wyoming Business Council is so screwed up. So their argument is these businesses will not come here unless we give them all these incentives, unless we give them a tax break, unless we have a giant business park to put their headquarters in. Well, that's not true at all, and this is a perfect example. The PRCA said, you know what? We think a good place to put our headquarters would be in Cheyenne, right next to the Cheyenne Frontier Days. Government wasn't involved, and the reason that they made that decision, yes, it's because of Cheyenne Frontier Days, but it is also because of the low tax environment in Wyoming. That we have lower taxes, that we don't gouge companies for trying to set up shop here. But they came here regardless of the Wyoming Business Council. And this is a perfect example of why Josh Durrell's argument, and it's not just his, by the way, it's all the liberals in the legislature. Well, we have to have the Wyoming Business Council, and if we don't, businesses won't come here. Really? What about this? Had you not gotten involved, this probably would have been a done deal. But instead, what started out as a private bidding war turned into, Ken, you're going to have to vote on a bill to give a boatload of money to a private company. Isn't that fantastic? Well, no. Well, what we ought to do is stay the heck out of it. We don't need to be injecting taxpayer dollars. And here's a really easy way to look at that. You see these tax measures come up in your community all the time. Well, we need to, we have to pass this excise tax because we need to have a bigger YMCA and we need a bigger pool and we need another bike trail through the park. And, oh, by the way, we need another government building over here and the golf course needs a new clubhouse. So we're going to pass this excise tax. Now, the reason why pro-tax people include all of those different things in it is they think that everybody will have a piece of the pie, that will include a whole bunch of stuff, and that everybody will benefit from one piece or one part of this. Well, ask yourself, what if I don't golf? What if I don't use the bike trails? What if I don't go to the YMCA? What if I don't use all of these facilities that you're proposing? Well, you still have to pay the tax.
What if I believe that that rodeo is cruelty to animals?
we should excise you from the state of Wyoming is what we should do.
Yeah, but the point, obviously, that I'm making is here are people that honestly believe this is cruelty to animals, and we're using state money to promote cruelty to animals. How right is that?
Yeah, exactly right. And you're asking to use their tax dollars. Incidentally, when we were in New York, right before we left, there was a bunch of articles published about how cruel rodeo was, and Zoran Mamdani came out and said, well, they're going to ban rodeo in New York. Well, the very first day, Christine and I were in New York. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was the next morning because we got there late at night. So the next morning, it was a Sunday. We're walking around. We were staying in Midtown Manhattan, and we walked by Madison Square Garden, and all of the vendors were selling cowboy hats. And Christine says, hey, David, look at that. There's cattle trucks in downtown New York. And so we thought it was pretty funny because the PRCA, no, it was the PBR, Bull Riders, were at Madison Square Garden. It was just funny because here we are from Wyoming, and we show up, and everybody's selling cowboy hats, and everybody walking around Midtown were all in cowboy hats. It was kind of cool. Anyway, so government doesn't have any place in rodeo. It doesn't have any place in private business, and we should just stay the heck out of it. And if you get a chance, Ken, kill that bill. Well, let's go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll have the interview with U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. Back in a minute. Yeah, I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely, and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country, and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm
Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. The truth is, this program is expanding faster than, well, anybody in the mainstream media would like it to. The Cowboy State Politics Podcast, the Cowboy State Politics Live, the Outrider, the official newsletter of Cowboy State Politics, which, my apologies in my tardiness in getting that out. You will have it today. Yesterday was a long, long day. I had to get up very, 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 very early in the morning, way too early than anybody should ever be asked to get up, and interview U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman.
What, did you get up 6:30?
No, actually, I was up at 4 yesterday, believe it or not. Anyway, I didn't have to interview Harriet at 4. It was at 7.
I'm not saying anything anymore, but there was a time in my varied careers when I was a bread truck driver.
Oh, Lord.
And I was getting up at 2:30.
Yeah.
That was insane.
Time to make the donuts. All right. So yesterday on the program, well, not on the program, but before the program, I had a chance to interview U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. And, you know, being a busy congresswoman, sometimes you got to talk to her pretty early in the morning. And so we had a long and pretty varied discussion on a lot of different things. So I'm going to go ahead and play that interview for you now. It runs about 27 minutes, and we'll listen to it, and then we'll talk about it at the other side. Joining me on the phone is now U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. Harriet, it's been a really long time since we've talked.
You know, it has. And I think that we got disrupted in our schedule because we were so focused on the holidays, which is a good thing. But it's good to be back with you, David.
Well, I'm glad that we could set this up even as early as it is. So there's a lot of things that I want to talk to you about. First, I guess I don't have to ask you if you're going to run for governor anymore.
I think the cat's out of the bag.
Just a little bit. Could you walk me through that decision? You know, why you decided to run for the Senate, and just talk to me about it.
Okay. You know, so much of the bad stuff that affects Wyoming comes out of Washington, D.C. We've known that for a long, long time. As a private attorney, I fought it. I fought it from the standpoint of policy as well as litigation, and that continues. But right now, we have an opportunity with this president and hopefully the next president that we can fundamentally change how Washington, D.C. works. And with my skill set, with my background in the regulatory and administrative realm, fighting the agencies, understanding how the executive branch works, understanding how the deep state works. And when I talk about the deep state, I'm not just talking about the FBI or CIA. I'm talking about the EPA and some of these other agencies and the mechanisms by which they have been able to basically weaponize their power against American citizens. So I think that I actually bring a fairly unique skill set to the United States Senate. And so I started thinking about this last year. Cynthia and I obviously had some discussions about it. Cynthia is a very good friend of mine. And I just ultimately made the decision that I think my role, my background, my history, and what I'm doing in DC, I need to continue. I think that I have been effective as a congressman for Wyoming. I've been fighting the battles here, and I want to continue with that.
Oh, I think there's no question that you are among the very few pretty new legislators in the House of Representatives to have as much stroke as you do. And I got to tell you, it's been kind of fun to watch.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I have. You know, last night I was up until well after midnight. We were battling over trying to save our small refineries. And you know, the refineries in Wyoming are by definition considered small refineries, and they have certain exemptions related to the fuel standard issues and emissions and things like that. And boy, there is a move afoot to destroy them. And we fought for 2.5 hours last night, making sure that we could protect them in this next appropriations package. And we ultimately succeeded in doing that.
Well, what was their plan? What were they going to do to them?
So basically, what happens is that folks want to pit the ethanol folks, you know, our farmers, against our oil and gas people. And I don't see this as a binary choice. I don't see that we either can have E15 or we can have small refineries. I think that we have to finesse this much more in terms of addressing this issue. but there was potentially amendment that was going to be introduced to the appropriations package that would have taken away the exemptions that our small refineries have. If they don't have those exemptions, they cannot, they'll go broke. It's just that simple. And I think really what was happening here is the big guys were using our farmers and our ethanol folks as a way to get out our small refineries. And so we had some great allies from Texas fighting with us last night, Chip Roy, Nathaniel Moran. There were quite a few of us just really duked this out, and we ultimately reached a decision and agreement that I think that we can absolutely live with, and we can help our farmers at the same time we can protect these jobs and these businesses in our states.
Well, I think you see that in a lot of different industries. Certainly, like the meat packing industry is one of those. But in oil and gas, a lot of the producers in Wyoming are not Chevron or Exxon or any of those. I mean, a lot of them are pretty small producers, and so it makes sense that you would have small refineries also. And it might just be the nature of big business trying to get rid of the little guy.
Well, I think that that's a constant battle that we have. There's no question that there's always this effort for vertical integration. You made a very good point. You see it in the beef industry, the cattle and beef industry. You've always got a David and Goliath type situation, and that's here too. And you're absolutely correct. The vast majority of oil and gas producers in the state of Wyoming are small producers, not the Exxons of the world, or the BPs. They are the mom and pops out of Gillette, and it is absolutely imperative that we protect them and that we protect our refineries, such as over at Sinclair, Newcastle. We have to make sure that we are protecting those facilities. They create jobs. They are fabulous for the communities. And so we really kind of had to go toe to toe last night, but hopefully we can get where we need to be.
Well, and I don't think that it stops at just affecting local producers or local refineries. I mean, it affects everybody. I mean, the fuel supply that comes to places like Sheridan and Buffalo, I mean, it's not being trucked from a giant refinery. A lot of times it comes from Billings. And so
that's exactly right. Small businesses are the backbone of this country.
Absolutely.
And we do not want monopolistic situations. And this is just another one of those examples. And it's an example of why I made the decision to run for Senate, because my knowledge and background in this was, I think, kind of instrumental last night in being able to push back and say, again, this does not have to be binary, but what we have to do is work together rather than trying to say, if you win, I lose. That's not the way that this works.
Well, and I had a conversation yesterday, and this is going to kind of lead into something I've got for you in a little bit. But we're living in a time, at least in the media, where it really is a free marketplace of ideas. If you want to, you don't have to be employed by Fox News to have your own little radio show. I mean, I'm walking, talking proof of that. But there is always this, I don't know, I guess push by larger conglomerates to, just gain more and more market share. And one of the ways that you do that is you push smaller producers out. And it's like you say, it's a constant battle that we have to fight over the free market. And,
Yes.
All right. So you've got an interesting guy coming into the Judiciary Committee today, Mr. Jack Smith. What do you got for him?
Oh, I just want to have a nice, pleasant little conversation.
I bet you do.
Well, we want to find out the relationship between him and the January 6th committee. Why was he conspiring with them? We want to find out about the January 6th committee actually destroying documents, and not only the proprietary of that, but what other documents, what information have they not provided? As you may know, I'm on the select committee to actually find out what happened on January 6th. We had our first hearing last week, and it was pretty fascinating. I don't know if you saw the exchange between myself and... Okay, so I had an exchange with Jamie Raskin and the Democrats' witness, because they're constantly talking about an insurrection. But the point that I made was that nobody was charged, prosecuted, or convicted of insurrection. So we went round and round and round over that. I I would commend you to watch that video and then also read the editorial by Jonathan Turley dissecting what happened there. And so that's the way that the Democrats have gotten away with this hysteria over January 6th, is they've labeled it something that it wasn't and accused every single person who was there of being an insurrectionist.
Yes.
But we are finding out some incredibly important information about what happened that day. For example, if you've ever been to the U.S. Capitol, you will see bike racks everywhere. And that's what the Capitol Police uses for crowd control. It's what they use for a line of demarcation between where the public can be and where we can be, where we're allowed to go, but where the public, it's to direct people. It identifies, where you're going to be trespassed or where you're going to be on public ground, all of those things. They are always there. This is what they use. Anybody who's been here would see them. The night before January 6th, there was an order given, we don't know by whom, an order given to remove all bike racks around the U.S. Capitol. Now, who gave that order, why, when, and what was the intent? Who was involved with that? The other thing that we know from this hearing is that I believe that the FBI probably knew within a matter of months who the pipe bomber was.
Yes.
But it didn't fit their narrative. And so basically they covered it up. And so the information that we were able to expose just last week are bombshells in terms of what actually happened on January 6th and the cover-up associated with the J6 committee.
Well, and one of the other things that came out yesterday, I think, is that, and I don't know if this came out of your committee or if it was another scoop from somebody else, but that the FBI was paying sedition hunters to go find, everybody that appeared at the January 6th, or that was in, basically in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. So they were paying a private partisan organization to help prosecute American citizens.
And not only that, they were conspiring with people from the UK. That sound familiar?
Yep.
They were conspiring with someone from the United Kingdom, from England, to help in that endeavor. So here we have the whole Russia collusion hoax related to the Steele dossier. I mean, there you got the English connection right there. They did it again with these guys.
Just the entire thing. And I think this is one of those things, Harriet, that we'll probably never know the depth of it. That there's just so much collusion.
There's so much collusion. There's so much of the conspiracy. I really believe, David, where this comes from. They never expected Donald Trump to win in 2015 or 2016. So they never covered their tracks as they tried to frame him as a Russian asset during the 2016 election. So then he gets in there. They're scrambling, try to figure out what are we going to do? We've been trying to set this guy up for the last 15 months, and now we've got the situation where he's our boss. So from then on, you've had pure panic in Washington, D.C., as these folks have sought to cover their tracks and deflect attention from the crimes that they committed.
Well, and this is one of those issues that touches people in every state. I mean, I know several people in Wyoming that were at or in around the Capitol on January 6th, that there were attempts to to try to destroy these people's lives. And
yes,
some of them were successful.
Well, and that's why I keep going back to the fact that words matter. And that's why I tangled with our little friend, Jamie Raskin, because what they're saying when they keep accusing people of insurrection and those things, they're lying. They're lying and they're deflecting attention from what actually happened that day. And here's part of the reason why this is so critical. We never want anything like that to happen again, regardless of who may be involved or what the situation. We want to make sure that we are protecting the people on the Capitol grounds and that we do not turn into a third world dictatorship like you see in other places where you have this kind of mayhem on a daily or weekly basis. We can't have this. We live in a civilized society. The rule of law matters. It means something. And yet we had a situation where our own government was weaponized against these people for years and years, using an incorrect standard to go after them. The United States Supreme Court actually reversed many of the convictions of these folks because they were overcharging them to try to get felonies out of simple trespass cases. I mean, I can go on and on and on, and we don't have to rehash all of that. But it's important because you have to hold your government accountable. And if you don't hold your government accountable, pretty soon the government can do anything that it wants to do. And you and I were talking offline about that. You know, can they force us to say certain things? Can they force us to speak certain truths? And my answer is no, they can't.
Well, that's actually a pretty good segue into another question that I had for you. I saw yesterday where, and I think I may have the article here, but anyway, the FCC chairman, or let's see here, it's a piece from the New York Post, and I'll just give you the headline. It says FCC cracking down on liberal talk shows, not giving equal airtime to GOP guests. This sounds a lot like the fairness doctrine and net neutrality to me.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why they're doing that stuff. There are a lot of important things. It's the very same reason why I said defund PBS and NPR. There are two, at the time that they were created, what did we have? Maybe three different opportunities for news and content. Now you literally have thousands.
Yes.
We can find what it is that we want to hear, and we don't need the government inserting itself in the relationship between radio stations and their guests or their agenda. They get to have an agenda. That's my point about this, and the point that I've made over and over again to people. People will say, well, you can't spread misinformation. And I say, yeah, you can.
Absolutely, you can.
First of all, who decides what's misinformation? That's the scary question. But then even in addition to that, if I want to say that the sky is orange, I can say the sky is orange, and the federal government, the state government cannot prevent me from doing so. They can make fun of me.
Sure.
They can make fun of me, but they can't say, sorry, Harriet, you don't get to say that. I can say what I want.
Well, and there are so many examples. Think about the National Enquirer. Right? They spread BS. Like, I mean, that's how they make their money. Now, on occasion, a blue dress shows up and they get it right. But they absolutely have a right to publish whatever they want. And, you know, I find it amazing. Like last night I was looking for video clips, from 10, 15, 20 years ago about the fairness doctrine, where it was conservatives saying, now, hold on a minute. You can't tell people what to say. Well, here we are. We have a federal agency under a Republican administration saying that exact thing.
Yeah, it's not a good look. Not a good look. But there's plenty of us back here who say, yeah, we're not going down that road again. People have the right to say what they believe. It is the marketplace of ideas. And that is why one of the bills that I have championed since I've been back here is the First Amendment Accountability Act. And that is to the extent that the federal government, anybody in the federal government attempts to violate any one of my 5 pillars of the First Amendment, I can hold them accountable for it. And I think that this kind of falls in line with that.
Well, and I don't know if you saw this or not, but one of the main themes, well, there have been a lot of main themes that have been running through the Appropriations Committee down in Cheyenne. One of them is, hey, what's the proper role of government, which I think that's a conversation we should always have. But another one is that about free markets. There's an entire committee meeting where the committee members are talking to the Wyoming Business Council, and those folks are saying, well, the free market is broken. The free market doesn't really exist. And while this seems to be like an esoteric topic that, most people don't pay attention to, I think this is critical at this time because there are so many places where we have to defend the free market. I mean, just a minute ago, we were talking about oil and gas. Here we're talking about the media. And I think this is tremendously important.
Well, and what's interesting about it is that the free market is distorted by government. So I often say that government is always trying to fix its last solution. In other words, the government comes into the market, picks winners and losers, and then they say, oops, well, that didn't turn out exactly the way that we wanted to. How about if we tweak this right over here? Or how about if we tweak that? Or how about, okay, so we destroyed your business model. How about if we give you this and then you can do a different business model? So instead of building, wooden boxes, you can build plastic boxes, but you can't get in the business of wooden boxes because we've already allowed Joe over there to build the wooden boxes. So now we'll give you the opportunity to build plastic boxes because we destroyed your previous business model. And that is a discussion worth having. And I think that there's probably a variety of ways to thread that needle in a way that is going to be the best, but it is the distortion of markets that creates the situation that undermines the free market system.
Well, and one of the big ones that I don't know if I've been in the middle of it, but I'm kind of on the periphery, is this affordable housing boondoggle. And Minnesota has their own child care scandal going on. The scandal here is affordable housing, and it's that very thing. Government getting in the middle of something and trying to solve, like you said, its last solution.
You mean low income housing?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I'm for affordable housing, but it's the low income side of it. And yeah, there's stuff that's being exposed left and right about that. And here's the other part of it that I think everybody needs to understand, whether you work for government, you're inside government, you've got skepticism of government, or you think that the government is doing exactly what it should be. My whole point about it is that there's got to be the transparency. And it's one of the reasons why I do a video every week when I'm in Washington, Week in Washington. I do my newsletter. I go out and I do town halls. I feel that it's critically important that people understand what I'm doing and why, because that's the only way I can be accountable to the folks in Wyoming. And that is when we're asking the government to comply with Open Meetings Act or Public Records Act. It isn't even necessarily that we are saying that they are doing something wrong, although they may very well be doing that. But what we are saying is that we're the bosses here. We're the ones who who write you the check. We're the ones that pay you. We're the ones that get to see your work. We need you to show us your work. That's all that this is about. And when you look at what has happened in Minnesota, it is stunning to me that the first time that we really get a glimpse into the fraud, it has already exceeded the GDPs of many countries around the world. In other words, the fraud is so magnificent that there isn't any way possible that that all of the people in Minnesota, the folks that were responsible for overseeing this, were either involved or entirely complicit. There's no way it could have increased to this magnitude without the complicity of the people responsible for overseeing these agencies.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point that, we often see stories, and this is definitely the case in Wyoming. We see stories on the news broadcast and it's, fraud in Minnesota. And, our immediate, reaction is, well, of course there is. It's run by Democrats. But
yeah.
I don't think that a lot of us really understand the magnitude of it. That we're not
We
talking.
never did.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking $1 billion or $2 billion. I mean, it's multiple billions of dollars.
And you want to know one of the things that bothers me so much about that is that when I'm back here and I'm trying to figure out ways that we can do things that actually improve the lives of people in Wyoming and really across the country. But my focus is obviously Wyoming. And the question is, well, what's your pay for? How are we going to pay for this? And those are very legitimate questions. And then you realize that we could have really redone the entire infrastructure of the North Platte project for what these people stole in Minnesota and sent to Somalia. We could have done we could have built a railroad from Casper to California, to the Gulf of California, to export our coal on a straight line for what they stole in Minnesota. And you sit here and you start thinking about what they took away from us and the opportunity cost associated with that graft. And it just infuriates you, because what you realize is that, again, the complicity of the people, the folks in Minnesota, and their involvement with this. I mean, I'm just going to ask some very simple questions. If 80% of the people of the Somalians in Minnesota are on welfare, why do they need daycare?
Yeah.
Why aren't they taking care of their own kids? If they are capable of sending $1 million out of Minnesota to Somalia every week, why are they on welfare, and why have we given them temporary protective status? If they go to Somalia or any other country that they came from, where they sought asylum from because of the risks associated with being there, if they go there for vacation, shouldn't we ship them home? I mean, what is their claim for asylum if they're going there for vacation and to visit their family? What is the risk? What are they still hiding from? And you start asking these incredibly common sense questions, and pretty soon you think it's not even remotely possible that we could have this level of incompetence and this level of fraud with the people that were elected in that state and others.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly incredible, both in the real definition of that word and Ken's definition. Not credible at all. So there's one other item I wanted to talk to you about, and I think this is a biggie because it hasn't happened since probably the Clinton administration. But you guys are actually passing appropriations bills. What happened?
We finally got down to work, and people realized the seriousness of what we're doing. We've got the trifecta with the president, the Senate, and the House, and we're doing what the American people sent us back here to do. We have 8 of them passed so far. We have funded a substantial part of our government. The final 4 are up this week. If we are able to do this, it will be the first time in decades that I believe that we have done all 12, that Congress has done all 12 appropriations bills. Here's another thing that's significant about that, and I didn't realize this until a couple of weeks ago. When we do continuing resolutions, which you know how I feel about those, but when we do continuing resolutions, those continuing resolutions have always been upon a Democrat budget. That's why Dems like continuing resolutions so much and why they fight so hard against actually doing appropriations bills. Because if you're doing a continuing resolution, the CRs that we have done have been based on the Biden budgets. This will be the first time that the moment that we get these 12 passed, if we are put in the position of having to do a CR in the future, it's based upon Republican priorities and Republican spending, meaning we will continue to be able to reduce spending in Washington, D.C.
So the question then is, so we haven't had appropriations bills passed in, like I said, since probably Clinton, which means we've been operating on the same budget for numerous years. Which one do you think it actually is?
Well, we have passed some appropriations bills. So the CR related to those would, in fact, be those budgets. But again, they were under Biden. They were under Biden. And keep in mind also that the Democrats did their reconciliation package too. Those were the things like the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. So that's the other reason now, for the first time that many people are here in Congress, we would actually, if there's ever a need to do a CR, we would be doing it based upon the Republican priorities. And I can tell you, people are pretty excited about that, especially the conservatives. They're pretty excited about the fact that we are getting our priorities and our trajectory in place versus the Democrats.
Well, I think it's exciting, but there again, I'm one of those political wonks that likes to talk about budgets. All right, so last question, and then I got to run. So lots of announcements happening in the state. What's your take on this whole mess that's going on here?
Well, I'm watching it. I'm going to be heading home tomorrow. I'm obviously talking with people and what's going on. Politics can be messy sometimes, David.
Oh, it is.
They can. It is. And you can say that we have a terrible system, but as compared to everything else, it's the best in the world. So, things are just going to have to play out. Things can get messy, and that's what politics are. That's why we fight tooth and nail, like I did last night, protecting our industries. We're constantly pushing and shoving and pushing and shoving, trying to make sure that the people that we represent come out on top. And if everybody is fighting for their constituency and fighting for the right things, I think that things usually ricochet through the system and we come out okay.
All I know is it's pretty good fodder for setting up pools. The one I'm invested heavily in is the governor's race. I think the winning number is 12 candidates.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
I'm just
okay.
kidding.
Well, I'm going to have to head in. We've got the Jack Smith hearing this morning starting at 10, so I'm going to have to get ready for that.
All right, Harriet. Thank you very much. Go get him.
Thank you.
All right. So that was my interview with U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about a couple of things, and then I've got a few other stories to tell you about on this Friday, Open Line Friday. We'll take your calls coming up next. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, your illustrious host, documented to be way more right than anybody in the mainstream media. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Before the break, we were listening to my interview with U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. A lot of fun stuff in there, and I can't say enough about the conversations we're having about the free market. And, I know that it gets kind of esoteric sometimes, but think about it this way. Like, if you've had an idea to create a business, well, it doesn't really matter what it is, whether you're a carpenter or you're a plumber or you're a hairstylist or whatever, or you want to open up your own media company, you shouldn't have to compete with government in any way. And all too often, and you see it in every single Wyoming community, and the best example of this, well, there's a lot of them, but the one that always comes to my mind is the guy in Buffalo that owned a private gym. And he sunk every dollar he had into buying all the equipment to put in his gym, and he was running a good business. And then along comes government. Well, we have this fantastic YMCA, and we're going to build it up, and we're going to make the best gym possible for everybody in Buffalo. Well, what happens to the guy that put his last dime into his business? Well, now he gets to compete against government. And that is what we do. But it is all done with the mistaken notion of, well, we all contribute taxes. And so, we're all doing this for the public good. That it's all, well, we're going to help everybody. Well, the truth is, you end up hurting people that actually build the economy. Most people don't work for a big conglomerate company. Most people don't. I mean, a lot of people do work at Walmart, but it's not most people. The vast majority of people work for some form of small business or another. Either you're a carpenter, or you're a plumber, or you're an electrician, or you're a mechanic, or you're a hairstylist. And think about it, and just think, okay, my wife is a hairstylist. We own a salon. And In Sheridan, Wyoming, and we did our market research before we opened the salon, but in Sheridan, there are over 60 different salons. Now, all right, that number should like be kind of eye-popping for you, but most of those are individual people that have bought a little suite, a little office somewhere, and they're running their own small business. Now, I don't know of any politician that has suggested we have a government hairstyling salon. I wouldn't put it past some of these redcoats, but let's just say that they do. Yeah, Ken's over there going, don't give them any ideas, David, stop. But let's just say that they do. Why should that one person who's trying to make it on their own, who's trying to build their own business and provide a good service, why should they have to compete with government? Okay, well, let's do another one. I know of several people that make their own creams, their own face creams and beauty products, and maybe they do it with all, herbal stuff, and they've come up with something really good. There's a gal that works in my wife's salon that does that very thing. Well, the Wyoming Business Council gave $2 million to a cosmetics company in Jackson, who, by the way, has products that are for sale in Sephora. So why should that gal that works for my wife have to compete with Josh Durrell and the Wyoming Business Council giving millions of dollars to people in Jackson who by the way, are making their products with stuff they've picked off of your property? That is, off of the national forest, not the national forest, but the national park. You see, government gets involved, and it's always at the behest of, well, we're doing this for everybody. Everybody benefits. No, not everybody benefits. In fact, what you do is hurt most people. Stay the heck out of business. And, I know that you probably get tired of me harping on this, but I think this is the most important discussion that relates specifically to your life. This is the one that touches more people than anything. And we're all and the government does a really good job of brainwashing everybody into believing that the Wyoming Business Council does a great job, or the Wyoming Energy Authority, or whatever stupid agency they come up with that's going to help everybody. And Ken, I know you get inundated with these people. They come before your committee and, it's give me money for this, I'm going to help out this group. Give me money for that, I'm going to help out that group. And the easy solution is you don't need to do that. But the problem is there are so many people that get elected that they have that mindset that, I'm going to get elected and I'm going to help everybody. That's not your job. Your job is to create an environment where business can prosper, to create lower taxes, lower regulation, to get government the heck out of everybody's life and let us prosecute our own lives. And that's why we all live in Wyoming. Ken, I got up this morning and it was 1 degree outside. Nobody in their right mind lives in a place where it's 1 degree a lot of the time. Do you know why we do? Why do you live here, Ken?
Because I can't live in Greenland.
Yet. You can't live in Greenland yet. But my point is, we live here so that we can be left alone. Because it's a beautiful place where we can do what we want, we can raise our families, and we can start a business if we want to. And government, for the most part, more than probably any other state, stays the heck out of our lives. But that's not why these people get elected.
When I left the Army, and this was 30 years ago.
I was going to say back in 29.
Yeah. That number keeps coming back.
Weird.
When I left the Army, I was last stationed at Fort Carson. And in order to transition out, before I had gotten out, I started doing some cabinetry work on the side and doing other things. Anyway, long story short, I spent the next few years and built a business in Colorado Springs that actually employed a half dozen people.
Carpentry, right?
Yeah, as many. We were basically kitchen and bathroom.
Yeah, that's your
remodeling.
bailiwick, right?
Yeah. And I had picked up a partner down there, and he and I were doing pretty well. And we came back to visit Wyoming once, and I just drove around, and I don't belong on the Front Range of Colorado. I want to come home. Well, this kind of upset my partner, and he was a little distraught at losing or me breaking up the partnership. So ultimately, what ended up happening is I basically gave him the business and walked away. And I came back to Thermop. My dad was the economic development coordinator there at the time.
Those words keep coming up.
Oh, I know. I went back to Thermop and set up shop myself. And for the next several years, just started building up a clientele, doing what it takes to build up the business, working my tail off, didn't basically take a dime from anybody, especially government. And at some point, somebody got this bright idea that we should reach out to XYZ company that manufactures cabinets, because we could bring him in here. We'll put him in our business park, which incidentally never did get anybody. This deal ended up falling through, thanks in part to my dad. But I'm sitting there busting my tail, trying to do the right thing, paying my taxes, doing everything. I don't want any government help. I don't want the shackles that come with the shekels. And all of a sudden, this bright idea to offer this other company, basically rent-free, tax-free, we'll give you low-interest loans, at least with loans and not grants, to build a manufacturing facility. And it's billed as a great deal for Thought because he's going to hire 12 people.
Jobs.
Yeah. Where does that leave me?
Mm-hmm.
And I will admit that's part of my frustration and underlying dislike of the Wyoming Business Council is I felt firsthand the unfairness of it. And I've always been kind of a purist that government just needs to create a level playing field and stay out of the way.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could have been here for the meeting you had in the studio. I guess it was earlier this week. But a friend of ours who hopefully is going to be joining us. Don't know if that's going to happen yet. But anyway, been in this industry for a really long time, like his entire career.
Broadcasting.
Yeah.
You say this industry. We were just talking about carpentry. I didn't want to make
Yeah, he's not a carpenter. He's a broadcaster. Anyway, so he walks into this studio. And again, I wish I could have been here. But from what he told me in a later phone conversation and what Ken relayed to me is he walked through that door over there and it blew his mind what we have sitting right here. And I am enormously proud that the program that I've built, the live program that Ken and I have built, this is all our stuff. And, we've done it through hard work and getting up early and driving to places that we probably didn't want to be at, and just building a business that works. So why should we have to compete with people like NPR? Frankly, there's no competition there. I mean, it's NPR and, well, it's us. But why should we have to compete with an outfit that gets government funding? We shouldn't. And the analytics of this show, but analytics, if you don't know what that means, that's all the data. The viewers, you hear all these like Nielsen ratings and all that. That's old news, man. Radio stations, they can't tell you really how many people are listening. This show, we can. And it is a tremendous amount. The Open Range Record, it's got a tremendous amount of hits. And all of it is private. But where we run into problems with government is they try to get involved and say, this is a good thing. Look at this. We can make it better. And it never works. I mean, you end up with empty business parks that have never produced anything. Excuse me, never is a strong word. They do produce bales of hay.
Yeah, antiquated towers.
From the Cold War.
Old equipment that doesn't really work real well.
Yeah. So if you have tried to start a business and run up against government, and maybe you haven't thought about it that way, but go ahead and give me a call. The phone number here in the studio, it is Open Line Friday. It's 307-374-8989. I was a little remiss in my duties and didn't tell you that the phone lines were open, but they've been open all program long. And so if you want to talk to us, if you got a story like that, when you're having to compete with business, which you probably didn't even realize it at the time, go ahead and give me a call. The phone number is 307-374-8989. And if you want to talk about anything else, we're cool with that.
Maybe somebody's on the other side and wants to talk about how great it was to receive a couple of $1 million from the Wyoming Business Council. You can feel free to call in, but don't swear at me.
Yeah, if you own a cosmetics company in Jackson that's getting $2 million from taxpayers, so that you can peddle your products in Sephora, go ahead and give me a call. So there is an op-ed up on the Cow Pie. Actually, there's a couple of them that I want to talk about. This one is probably going to irritate Agent 29, but it's my show. So here we go. Guest column. The Freedom Caucus, math is new math. And this is brought to us by the not so illustrious Chi-Com Som. You want to know why I call it Albert Summers Chi-Com Som? Well, it's because he was on the board of an outfit, the SLLF, who has direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And so, if you're on the board of that organization, you have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. I bet you didn't know that the Wyoming Speaker of the House was hooked up with the Chi-Coms at the same time he was the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, former.
Yeah, he's former Speaker of the House.
Sorry, Chip.
Sorry, Chippy. I wasn't as clear as I should have been on that one. If you want to call in and berate me over that, go ahead. All right. So from the Cow Pie, guest columnist Chi-Com Som writes. Of course, it doesn't say that. Wyoming taxpayers deserve straight talk, and I encourage folks to look at the published fiscal profile themselves. Follow the facts and don't be fooled by Freedom Caucus math. You better sharpen your pencil over there, 29. I read with interest the guest column titled Democrat Math, What's Not Being Said About the Budget by Representative John Baer, who, by the way, next week is going to be joining us in the studio. I think that's on the 29th. Am I right about that one?
I think you said Tuesday, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's not going to be
Or
Tuesday.
Thursday. Yeah.
Anyway, he'll be joining us in the studio. In that piece, clearly opinion, not fact, Chairman Baer writes, if state spending continues to increase at this rate, our own projections put us $800 million in the red by 2029.
Wait a second.
Yep.
He says our own projections. What he means is this is LSO.
Yes.
This is the people that we pay to look at the Craig reports, to look at everything else and say, where are we headed?
Yeah. So it's not John Baer figuring out the numbers. It's not Ken over there with his little stubby pencil figuring out these numbers. It is the Legislative Service Office. After doing a little research on the Wyoming Legislature's website, it was apparent that Chairman Baer was doing some kind of new math, Freedom Caucus math. The Legislative Service Office fiscal staff produces the LSO long-term profile built upon the governor's recommended budget. God, my eyes are glazing over. The profile provides a high-level view of where Wyoming's finances are headed over the course of 3 biennia through the end of 2030. Does this guy ever get to the point? Let's see here. Here it is. According to the math I grew up with, that is a pretty large discrepancy, but it's consistent with most Freedom Caucus math. A closer look at what is driving the $124.5 million deficit shows the school foundation program is underwater $117.5 million, and the general fund is nearly flat, being only $7 million. This is how the Redcoats do math. Listen to this sentence, Ken. And just, I've got my duct tape here somewhere. Do you need it?
No, I'm good. I'm used to this.
Okay. All right. Here we go. The general fund, he says, is nearly flat. It's only $7 million in the red. Given that general fund expenditures are over $3.8 billion between 2029 and 2030, a $7 million gap is easily fixable. This is politician math, is what this is. $1 million to me is a gigantic amount of money. Now, I understand when you're dealing with billions, $1 million really isn't that much. But here's the discrepancy. You go to Cheyenne thinking that, wow, $1 million to me is a lot of money. And you come out thinking, well, $1 million, that's pocket change. You know, we spend that in a minute, which I don't know. That's probably not true. But it may not be too far off. So Sommer says, so why the gap? Look at box 2 on the long-term profile. And this is what these redcoats do all of the time. They try to obfuscate the actual issue. And he spent, and this entire page is nothing but him going back and forth, the long-term profile, the biennial profile, the blah, 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 blah. I don't even know what that means.
He fails to mention the most important one, the one that we have framed outside appropriations building or the outside
Well,
the
see,
room
the
there.
problem is, Ken, that we're assuming Chai-Com Som can read.
Well, we're also assuming he's honest.
Oh no, I'm not assuming that at all. He's a redcoat. All right, so here's the end of his piece. He says, under plain cowboy math, if you compare the projected gap of 124 million with the statutory savings transfer of 212 million, we're not headed off a fiscal cliff, are actually in the black by 87.6. Chairman Bear also stated the JAC budget limits runaway government growth by cutting waste while fully funding the necessary functions of government. But on January 13th, JAC voted to cut the state's funding of the University of Wyoming by $40 million, almost 11% of what UW receives, according to, all right, so I would not call this runaway government growth. Wyoming taxpayers deserve straight talk, which is something that Albert Summers has never given to anybody. I encourage folks to look at the published fiscal profile itself. The truth is, my friends, is that a lot of money has been put in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, which is that's one of our big savings accounts. Now, Wyoming has around $30 billion socked away in various and sundry accounts. But what Chairman Bear is saying is that by 2030, if we don't do anything, we are going to be in the red by several $million. And all it takes, and you can take Albert Summers' piece. You should take it at face value for what it is, which it's not worth anything. But if all it would take to dip our finances into the red would be a change in the price of oil. What is it, 10, 20 bucks? Something like that. If the price of a barrel of oil drops $20 or $30, we are in the red. And by in the red, we mean that we are spending more than we are bringing in. Do I have that right, Ken?
Yeah. Right now, in Cheyenne, there is a hearing going on school recalibration.
Yes, at this moment, actually.
Yeah, and the numbers that we refer to, basically the LSO office tried to do their best work. The members of the CREG tried to do their best work to figure out what the ECAs coming out of this would do and how they would reflect. And there's a big portion of the problem. And so it goes from about a $200 million deficit starting in about 2029 to about a $400 million deficit to about an $800 million deficit, depending on what comes out of this. And if you watch the hostility that's going on as we speak, this is going to be a tough road to hoe. I expect it to come out more expensive than not. The fact is, as you pointed out the other day, we don't budget by how much cash we have. We budget by what do we think we're going to have. And so those people who prefer to take a very conservative estimate that doesn't include any of the changes we're about to make in school spending, think everything's just peachy keen and rosy. But when you look at the estimates about what most likely is going to happen, I think you realize there's some serious pucker.
Let's just talk about schools for a minute. There are these things built in that are automatic. They call them escalators. And so without the legislature doing anything, right? They don't have to vote on this at all. Our spending on schools, and Ken, correct me what this year's number is, but a year ago it was $200 million. Boom, every time. Every biennia that our school spending increases automatically. Am I right? Do I have that one pretty close?
Partially. There's also, what we're supposed to do is every 5 years, we're supposed to go through this recalibration
Right, which is happening
project,
right now.
which they haven't. After that, you come out with some bills, and then you pass the bills, and we've adjusted. Well, they haven't adjusted the model because they haven't been able to pass the bills the last 2 or 3 times they've tried this. So we're working on a way outdated model that is causing issues and problems and got us sued because we're supposedly not adequately funding education.
Which is weird.
To the tune of right at $20,000 per student per year just for the education. We're not talking transportation. We're not talking the buildings. That's the way that I look at it, rather than how many dollars went into it, because it doesn't really mean anything. So you have to look at what's happening on the big picture. What's happening on the big picture is we're about to get a very expensive bill, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to manage that.
But see, here's and this is the disconnect, right? So Ken is involved like on a daily basis in appropriations. And government speak often doesn't translate into normal people speak. And so a lot of this, the recalibration and, we got to pass this bill and that bill, and we have this thing tips into that thing. It's really government gobbledygook. But when you look at it from our perspective, look, education spending goes up every year, and it goes up by a gigantic amount of money. Now, the truth is, when you look at it from the big picture, and I think this is where most Wyoming citizens are, we're spending over $21,700 per student, which is what it was last year. How could you possibly not consider that adequately funding education? Oh, my God. Other states spend half that, and they do far better. So how is that not adequately funding education?
Yeah, and they do far better. That's important, because we hear constantly about how our schools are the cream of the crop.
Or the cream of the crap.
When half of the 8th graders can't read, they're not proficient at their level. Go look at the Y-top scores.
Yeah.
And that was when I challenged Megan Degenfelder, the superintendent of public instruction. So, we as a legislature are getting sued right now for not adequately funding education. How bad does it have to get before we sue you for putting out crappy product?
Yeah. And when I interviewed her, I hit her with that same question. I said, Megan, half the kids that come out of 8th grade can't read, or they can't read at a proficient level anyway, according to your own tests. And the answer and by the way, I think that she's a wonderfully pleasant person to talk to. But there's only one question that she directly answered in that interview, and I don't even know that she correctly answered that one or sufficiently answered it. But when I hit her with this other stuff, hey, we're turning out, a mediocre product. I'm not saying our kids are mediocre. I'm saying the level of education they're receiving is mediocre.
And I want to say this too. I don't believe the problem is the teachers on the ground.
I don't
they
think
are
so.
hamstrung by the system in which they work, which incidentally, most of the money that is collected doesn't go into the classroom. It goes elsewhere, and really isn't doing anything to help the situation that we have.
Well,
So we have a lot of hardworking teachers that are trying very hard to do their job.
Yeah, now just look at it this way. So you're a teacher, and let's just use round numbers just because it's easier. And so we're paying $20,000 a student. It's actually more than that, but we're using round numbers here. $20,000 a student, and you've got a classroom full of, let's say, 20 kids. And let's assume that we're paying the teacher $100,000 a year. We're not, by the way. Maybe we're 60 or 70 when you include benefits.
Yeah, the cost to employ.
Yeah, I mean, maybe 60 or 70, but let's just say $100,000. So if you've got 20 kids in the room and we're paying $20,000 a piece, we're paying more than that. 5 kids takes up the salary of that teacher. Where does the money from the other 15 kids go? They don't pay for transportation. The school district doesn't pay for the buildings. The state reimburses them for all of that. So where is the rest of that cash going? It's going to administration. It's going to activities, not transportation. It's going to football pads and weightlifting equipment and basketball jerseys. It is not going in the classroom. And so when I talk to teachers on the ground, and I've had this conversation with several of them, and they tell me that they've spent their own money on classroom supplies, that's a problem. Because, I mean, they're not making a king's ransom on their salary. I mean, maybe $70,000, including benefits.
That issue is wide enough that that's a well-known tax write-off.
Yeah.
If you're a teacher.
Yeah. And here's the thing. We have people in our legislature saying, well, we don't spend enough on education. Well, I mean, come on. Look at it from the outside. You're not spending the money where you need to be spending it. The legislature approved an 8.5% raise for everybody that worked for the school district, everybody in the state, even the custodian all the way up to the principal. Everybody got an 8.5% raise. And there was only one school district in Wyoming that actually gave that raise. And they gave more. than the 8.5%. I think it was like 10%. The rest of them, it was far lower. I mean, it was insulting, the raise that they gave. I mean, there was some, like Jackson, one of the most wealthy county in the country, didn't even give a 2% raise to their teachers. So I ask again, where is all our money? What have you done with it? I would love to see a full-blown forensic audit of any of these school districts just to find out where all of our cash is going, because it's not going to the kids. That's obvious. So let's go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the show. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Open Line Friday. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989. From the Blaze, Scott Bessent slaps down Gavin Newsom at Davos. He's here with his billionaire sugar daddy, Alex Soros. Now, Alex Soros is the guy that took over for the spooky dude, George Soros. Don't even think that George Soros is out of the picture, because he's not. He's spooky dude. I mean, he'll probably still be around after he croaks, which has got to be sometime soon.
Well, he and Nancy Pelosi are mostly plastic, which, as we know, lasts for millions of years.
This is true. And I quote, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent issued a rhetorical beatdown against Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom on the World Economic Forum in Davos. Newsom is trying to expand his national and global profile for the sake of a possible presidential campaign in 2028 and used the forum to criticize President Donald Trump. Here's what he said. Shame on him. He's too smug, too self-absorbed, and too economically illiterate to know anything. Well, that could be Josh Durrell saying that. I think it's very, very ironic that Governor Newsom, who strikes me as Patrick Bateman meets Sparkle Beach Ken. You know what? Instead of me saying it, let's just play the video. I mean, this is a gem. Here it is.
I think it's very, very ironic that, Governor Newsom, who strikes me as Patrick Bateman meets Sparkle Beach Ken, may be the only Californian who knows less about economics than Kamala Harris. He's here this week with his billionaire sugar daddy, Alex Soros. And the Davos is a perfect place for a man who, when everyone else was on lockdown, when he was having people arrested for going to church, he was having $1,000 a night meals at the French Laundry. And I'm sure the California people won't forget that. And I can tell my message to Governor Newsom is the Trump administration is coming to California. We are going to crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse. And I was told he was asked to give a speech on his signature policies, but he's not speaking because what have his economic policies brought? Outward migration from California, a gigantic budget deficit, the largest homeless population in America, and the poor folks in the Palisades who had their homes burned down. He is here hobnobbing with the global elite while his California citizens are still homeless. Shame on him. He is too smug, too self-absorbed, and too economically illiterate to know anything.
See,
Thank you very much.
Let me know if you need.
It's the hypocrisy of the left that keeps me going, my friends. That you have folks like Albert Summers and really ideologically speaking, he's really no different than Gavin Newsom. One of my favorite sound bites from Albert Summers is the old, I'm going to have to find this for you. I don't even want to preface it. But a lot of his policies have created, a situation where Wyoming and, is going to be in the red here before too long. And it's not hard to see. The picture is framed right outside the Appropriations Committee room, and you can walk up and see the data for yourself. And it's not, we're not talking high math here. It's easy. The more money you spend, the less you have in, that you have to pay your obligations. And the more government you create more obligations. And it is a never-ending cycle.
In the midst of that, there's a push right now, and you've talked about it, to sock some of the excess cash.
Yeah.
To stash some of that into permanent savings, for the future. You put that into there, and when things turn around in a couple of years, and we actually do have a problem, should we have a problem, you can't touch it. So what we're saying is, we're going to put it into savings, but we're going to put it into a savings account rather than a CD or a long-term,
right.
We're going to put it where worst comes to worst, we can get to it to fix this problem. We're not going to hamstring ourselves where our only answer is to turn around and increase the tax.
Yeah, well, and that's what they do. So you under red coat control of the legislature, what they would do every time there was a surplus of revenue, which basically what that means is they've overtaxed you. They taxed you way beyond.
Oh no, that wasn't the people's money. They're just freeloaders.
Yeah, we're just freeloaders. They've said stuff like that. But what they have done is socked it away in trust funds. Coffee cans is the phrase that a lot of legislators use. And they make it so incredibly complicated that even if you needed to get to that cash for whatever reason, to fund whatever program you needed, you couldn't do it because you have no idea where it's going. And instead of using that money that they have socked away, their immediate response to everything is we have to increase taxes. There are people in the Wyoming legislature, Nancy Case, who absolutely believes in creating a state income tax. That's the only way we're going to solve all of our fiscal problems. How about this one? We need to diversify our economy. Really what he means is we need to diversify the way that we can tax people. Earlier on in the program, we talked about the housing tax. But all of these people try to portray themselves as the experts. And Albert Summers is one of those. Let me give you one of his classics here. During the debate on whether or not Wyoming should own some gold, which, by the way, every country in the world has a gold reserve.
And the other day they were boasting about how much money they'd made since they were forced to buy the gold.
Yeah.
If they'd have bought it several years ago when we first brought it up, we'd have been clean in that.
Yeah, high cotton man. But here is what Albert Summers has to say about that.
Gold, the dollar bill is less volatile than gold. I don't understand this. I don't understand why it's good policy.
Oh, because he says this too.
I really don't understand why we would even contemplate going down this path. There's nothing, there's no value in it. Our investment team can invest in gold shares, gold now, if they think it's a wise choice, or silver shares, or whatever. Now, maybe they can't hold gold, or we can't hold the material, but I think this is apocalypse thinking. Is the apocalypse on us, and we're going to need gold to trade and barter in some future day when the world is ended? I mean, I just don't get it. This is not sound fiscal investment policy.
No. That's why every country on the face of the globe
How
has
many
a
of the
gold
big
reserve.
banks now are divesting themselves of cash and purchasing gold? That's one of the reasons the price of gold is going up.
Ken, that's apocalypse thinking. It really is. Well,
maybe that's the thinking we need.
Maybe so. What Ken was referring to about them boasting about how much money they made off of gold is that the gold, I can't even remember the title of the bill, but basically the bill said we need to buy some gold. It created the situation where we could buy gold, I guess is a better way to put it. And so recently the state of Wyoming purchased $10 million in gold.
Yeah, we had to.
Yes.
Yeah, we made that mandatory, and it's just $10 million isn't much.
No.
But
not when you're talking $30 billion.
If you get a chance next time you're at the Capitol, you go down there as you're headed down into the garden extension. There are several wall safes that you can walk into or look into. One of them is mocked up from how it would have looked, I don't know exactly when, 100 years ago or so, and it's full of fake gold bricks.
Mm-hmm.
It just tickled me that's in there. Now you can go back and look at that.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to know where the gold repository is now, but now we have $10 million worth of gold, and there was an article in the Cowboy earlier this week. I mean, I'd lose track so easily, but where they were bragging about how much they have made off of the price of gold. Well, the reason why countries end up, increasing their gold reserves or investors is because it is a stable asset. Now, I don't mean stable in terms of the value of it, because the value of gold is pegged. It has an inverse relationship to the value of the dollar. So when the value of the dollar goes down, the price of gold goes up. So right now, I don't even know what the spot price on gold is, but it's around $4,000 an ounce.
Yeah, I can't tell you the spot price on gold, but I can tell you that about a month ago, I bought some gold backs at $8 a piece. Today, they're worth $9.72 or $9.76.
Right.
That's a pretty good jump.
Okay, so let's see here. The gold spot price, right? Oh, I was way off. So the spot price on gold, like a month ago, it was a little north of $4,000. Today, it's $5,000. Why is that? Because the value of gold is not the value of gold that changes. It's the value of the dollar. And so when the dollar decreases in value, the price of an ounce of gold goes up. And
it takes more dollars to get an ounce of gold.
Right, exactly. Right, because the dollar is worth less than it was, last year. And it does go up and down quite a bit, okay, because of trading. And so big-time investors, when they see that the dollar is a little bit shaky, that we've been printing money hand over fist, well, instead of investing in treasuries, which are pieces of paper, they decide to invest in gold. Now, silver is another interesting one. The price of silver, this is incredible to me, Ken. It just topped $100 an ounce. Today, right now, the value of 1 ounce of silver is $101. Holy moly. I mean, just absolutely incredible. But why is that? It's because all of our rampant spending and money printing. And the truth is, both Republicans and Democrats print money. Donald Trump, during his first term, he printed a crap load of it. And now the only difference is Democrats print a whole bunch more. But see, the reason why a bunch of conservatives pushed for that bill is to say, look, we should be holding a stable asset and not keep this $30 billion in strips of paper, because we have no control over that. It's just, in the end, it becomes just a piece of paper. All right.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on what Albert Summers said about that's apocalyptic thinking.
Yes, it is. I wish you would listen to him. Not.
Money and funds are basically all kept in digital accounts, so it's all numbers somewhere in a machine.
Mm-hmm.
What happens with a big EMP blast? You know, we experienced it. We've talked about this before. You and I here, the power was out for the most part of the day, and you couldn't get to any cash.
Nope.
What happens if that data somehow is lost? How do you recover that? Well, I got $32 billion. No, you don't. You have a receipt, which doesn't mean anything, and you can't prove anything. There's so many things at play.
Well, and you're exactly right, Ken. One of the reasons why I think that everybody should have, I'm not saying you should take your life savings and put it in gold. You shouldn't do that. That's not, that's not reasonable. But you should have some, in your safe for oh crap moments.
Yeah, gold, silver, lead, brass.
Yeah, I have lots of those precious metals. Well, I did until they were lost in a tragic boating accident. All right, well, we're almost at the end of the program, but I wanted to bring one article to your attention. And this one is from Wildpile. Wyoming Board of Equalization readies lawsuit challenging residential property tax. And yesterday, the governor came out and said, no, hold off. Hold off. Don't be suing the legislature, which it's interesting how the Board of Equalization, which is a government agency, could sue the legislature. I don't understand that.
Well, 3 people appointed by the governor, which is why the governor can go in and pull them back.
Yes. But, it's another government agency that shouldn't be acting on its own. Anyway, so why do I bring this up? Because it was the open range record that broke this story. And thank you to some of our well-placed contacts within the state of Wyoming. But the truth is that the open range record broke this story. And let me just tell you what it's about. From Wildpile, a complaint expected January 22nd, so that was yesterday, will argue the law, which the legislature adopted in 2024, is unconstitutional. The State Board of Equalization will challenge a tax cap on residential property in court, arguing the Wyoming state law enacted 2 years ago is unconstitutional. Here's the thing that confuses me about this, that it's the Board of Equalization, their job is when you protest your property taxes to your county commissioner, you say, no, the assessor got it wrong. The first thing that happens is it goes before the county commissioners, and they decide whether or not the assessor was right. And almost always they side with the assessor. Well, you don't like that decision, and so you appeal it to the State Board of Equalization. That's their job, is to decide whether or not your property taxes are correct. And that's their only job. So I'm not exactly sure why they would be suing. It's all tax dollars, right? They're no doubt the insiders in Wyoming government tried to figure out a way to sue over this thing because it decreases the amount of property tax monies that are coming into counties, and so they had to find a way to sue. I think the law is entirely constitutional. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, but I think it's absolutely the wrong approach. The right approach to property taxes would be to do acquisition-based, assessments. You get taxed on what you paid for it. That's how the rest of our tax system works. I see no reason why it shouldn't do that. But the point here is it was the open range record that broke that story. Yay, us. So, well, that'll about do it for today's installment of the program. Have a good weekend, my friends. Don't miss Weekend Update. It's going to be a doozy. Oh, boy, it's going to be fun. Have a good weekend, my friends. See you next week.